Hey everybody, and welcome to our kitchen. Thanks for your patience in me not broadcasting this yesterday. My seasonal allergies are killing me. I got something in my contact yesterday and damaged my eye. I'm going to do the best that I can tonight. I only have one contact in, so I can't see as well as I usually do. We're going to do three things tonight. First, we're going to cook basmati rice. My preference as far as rice is concerned is for flavor and texture. Typically that's the type of rice you have accompanying with Indian dishes. And then we're going to do two classic dishes, one called Tikka Masala. Chicken Tikka Masala is not actually an Indian dish. It's Indian inspired. Its origins come out of Great Britain. They certainly eat a lot of curry there because of the large presence they had colonially in India and Southeast Asia. But it's not a dish that you would typically see in India. You can get it there now because it's so popular. So we're going to do that dish, and then another vegetarian dish called Saag Paneer. It's going to be a spinach dish with paneer cheese. All are very simple to make. The other night I made these at home for my family, and they had the entire meal from start to finish done in about 30 minutes. So neither of them are very complicated, and even if you mess up some of the steps, they're going to be good. So we're going to start with rice first tonight, and I do things a little bit differently when I'm cooking rice. With basmati rice, typically with rice, the ratio of water to rice is 2 to 1. So 2 cups water, 2 parts water to 1 part rice. This is 16 ounces of rice, which happens to also be 16 ounces weight, so it's a pound. It's one of the few things that's actually the same size as it weighs, which is really nice from a culinary application. So we're going to start this off tonight. I like to saute a little bit in butter before I start. Just adds a little bit of brown to it. So I've got some butter here. I'm going to put about 2.5 ounces, 3 ounces of butter into the bottom of the pan. You're going to get a little bit of action there from it. And we're going to go ahead and just drop the rice right into the pan. I'm going to let it sort of brown in the pan. So all this stuff around already. So I'm going to add a little salt to it at this point. Not a lot. I will salt it at the end. If you have too much salt in the rice, it helps. It will prevent it from absorbing the water evenly. So you just want to toast it just a little. You'll see some of the kernels are starting to get these little sort of white marks to it. Just feel like it improves the flavor. And so what we're going to do, pretty simple. I've got 1.5 containers. In this case, 24 ounces of water. I'm just going to let this come to a full boil for about 1.5, 2 minutes. And I'm just going to turn it off and set it to the side. And then it will rest until we're done. At the end, we'll just fluff it a little bit with a fork and add some salt to it. It'll be ready to serve. So just going to wait for that to come to a full boil. I'm going to go and put the lid on it to hold some of the heat in. This burner is not amazing. So while we're waiting for that to come to a boil, we're going to start preparing our chicken. Now, in the instructions I sent out on Tuesday, I instructed everybody to go ahead and season the chicken. For those of you that do our food basket, I gave you a pre-measured amount. You're going to use half of the spice on the chicken. And then we're going to use about 1/2 cup of yogurt. I like to use a full fat yogurt. Chobani is probably about as low fat as I'll go with it at 9 grams. There's a couple brands out there of Greek yogurt that have upwards of 22 grams of fat per serving, and those are amazing for these type of dishes. So, all right, so we're just going to go ahead and fold this chicken together with the spice and the yogurt.
Mackenzie Bell says hello.
Hey, Mackenzie. Is it hot down there? She's back in Mississippi, right? So just try to get a good even coating on it. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of salt to it at this point. It's about a teaspoon of salt. Salt is a pretty subjective thing, so I typically, in my recipes, will just indicate to do it by taste. And so I just encourage you guys, as you cook the dishes, add a little bit in the beginning because it's going to help penetrate the meat with the spices, kind of pull some of the moisture out of it. But as you're cooking, I typically will salt towards the end of the cooking process. While I'm still cooking the dish, and you can taste it. Some people like far more than others. I tend to like a fair amount of salt, and so Blake, would you do me a favor? Would you change out this sanitizer for me? It's on the sink over there on the very end. All right, so while we're letting that marinate, I'm going to go ahead and set it out of the way, and we're going to get ready to start the dish once we finish with the rice. Let's go ahead and check the rice here. All right, the rice is looking good. We've come to a full boil, good even rolling boil. I'm going to go ahead and stick the lid back on this. I'm just going to set it to the side and move on to the next dish. I'm just going to put it in my warming oven here. So. If you want to keep your oven at like 170 degrees, you could do the same thing and just kind of put it in the warmer. So,
hey Chef, I got a question for
yeah.
Steph Rasmussen.
Steph, how you doing?
The recipe says tablespoon, and you just said teaspoon.
Of?
That's a good question. So whatever you just put in. I don't know what I'd have to look at the recipe.
All right, yeah, I gave you guys pre-measured amounts, so. All right, so most Indian dishes or Indian-inspired dishes have two very basic things in common. The onion is a core ingredient in South Asian cuisine, and in nearly every curry. So it's got lots of flavor, a lot of rich umami sort of baseline flavoring. I'm going to show you really quickly how to dice an onion. People, there's a lot of ways to do this, and yet everybody struggles with it. So it's pretty simple. Take your onion, cut it in half. For those of you that aren't as confident with your knife, you can certainly set it on the end. I'm going to go ahead and cut it like 90% through. Okay, typically do that from the side. And then you're just going to come back down. You can see me here. And once again, cutting about 90% to the back. You're just going to score it all the way to the bottom. Okay? And then you can just basically cut it off the end, and it's diced for you. The only tricky bit is when you get to the end, there's this last piece, but it's about the right thickness, and you can just kind of cut it down like that. Okay? So.
It was salt.
Salt's sort of subjective, so like I was saying, I think I said do it to taste in the recipe, didn't I? Maybe. Oh, it's a teaspoon for marinating the chicken. Yeah. Tablespoon. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take butter and onion. We're going to go ahead and start sauteing down and put about 1/2 pound of butter. Seems like a lot. That's where the flavor's at. So we're going to go ahead and put this onion in here. We're going to start sauteing it down while that chicken is cooking. We're getting kind of infusing with some of those spices. If you're using breast meat, I recommend giving it a good 30 minutes of marinating time. Those of you who had our food baskets, I gave you thigh meat, so it's going to absorb that flavor a lot quicker. And is that making you cry yet?
I was to say, is that hurting your contact?
Nah. Actually, the contacts do a nice job of keeping it out.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Draven says he loves you, and he also loves Isaiah.
Who said that?
Draven.
Hey, Draven. Good to hear from you. So at this point, as the onions start to sort of like become translucent, keep sauteing those down. And in just a second, we're going to add the rest of the spice blend to this. But while we're doing that, we're going to go ahead and chop up some garlic. Garlic is another baseline ingredient in a lot of these dishes. You don't want to put it in the pan too early because it has a high residual sugar and it will burn. In the recipe I gave you, I said use 6 cloves. I'm going to use a little bit more than that because I like garlic. And the procedure to chopping garlic is pretty easy. They tend to roll around on the board, so you can just crush it really well before you start chopping. it doesn't have to be a perfect mince. All right.
Brandon, someone named Kareem, maybe, said tell you cardboard.
Cardboard Kareem.
Hey, Kareem! How's Mexico? All right, so if you have trouble with the garlic spilling around your board, you can put a little salt on it. This serves two functions. It kind of adds a little roughness to the surface, so it's not going to skate around as much. And also, as you cut it, it's going to absorb the juices from the garlic, so you're not going to leave a lot of that flavor on the cutting board. Okay. All right, let's take a look at the onions. You can see that they're starting to become slightly translucent. The butter's all melted in. I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of this spice blend. The term masala, if you're wondering about that, this is chicken tikka masala, or tikka masala, depending on where you're from. Masala refers just simply to a blend of spices. So tikka masala would be the type of blend. There's garam masala, obviously everybody's familiar, a lot of people are familiar with that. But it's just the term used to define that particular blend of spices. So in this dish we've got ginger, cardamom, paprika, garlic, black pepper, and cumin. And ground coriander, I forgot about that one. So. All right, that's good. Shake that board with the cutting here. All right. Put that garlic in there. Now, one thing to take note of, while I have everybody's attention, food safety is really critical. Something like 1 million people a year get sick in their own homes from not sanitizing properly. And one thing that does happen a lot, especially when people are cooking at home, is you'll cut up your protein like your chicken. Here in the kitchen, we have got different colored cutting boards for different applications. At home, people often will reuse the same cutting board for the same project without sanitizing it properly in between. And it's a good way to get sick. So ready-to-eat foods, vegetables, things that don't need to be cooked can be cut separately. If you're cooking raw meat, you definitely want to use separate utensils to sanitize the counter before you move on to the next step. So we're going to go ahead and let this keep cooking down until we develop a little bit of a fond on the bottom of the pan. You can see that the spices are absorbing all that butter. As they toast in the bottom of the pan with the onions, it's going to open up the flavor on them a little bit. The dried spices, they tend to need to kind of bloom a little bit before you put them fully into action in the dish. So while we're waiting for that to get to that point, I'm going to go ahead and prepare something for the next dish, and just show you a little secret. The next dish is going to call for minced ginger, and people are always like, what do I do with the skin? It's so hard to peel it. So you're trying to peel it with a peeler or with your knife, and you lose a lot of ginger. If you just use the back of a spoon, it peels pretty easily. You can just kind of scrape it off, just like that. So while you're waiting for your spices to cook down, you can go ahead and clean up your ginger and get it ready for the next dish. If it's good, clean ginger and you know where it comes from, leave the skin on. There's a lot of nutrients in there, and it has a lot of spice, so it's concentrated on the surface. So there you go with the ginger. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and add the chicken to this now. You can kind of smell the spices kind of toasting. If you look down, you can see some brown edges developing. It opens up the spice a little bit. Even with my allergies, I can smell it. It smells good. So I'm going to go ahead and add the chicken to it now, into this dish. And we're going to cook the chicken to about 50% of the way done. Go ahead. Fold it together with the onions. First off, gas on that thing. All right. So keep in mind, of course, that this spoon is now contaminated with chicken. So as it cooks in the dish, you'll be okay to use it. And, don't just set it down on your cutting board. So I'm gonna go ahead and set it over here on this cloth. All right. So while we get started, or while that's cooking, I'm gonna go ahead and get some things started for the next dish. So I'm gonna go ahead and mince this up right here, and then we're gonna chop cilantro. I have about 3 ounces of cilantro here. I'm going to split this between the 2 dishes. The majority of it's going to go to the Tikka Masala at the very end. And yeah, we'll go from there. Any questions there, Brandon? People are just quiet and cooking. It's a little less intimidating than the Chateaubriand from last week. That's a big one to start with. So with ginger, unlike garlic that gets really tender when you cook it, ginger retains a lot of its texture. It's got a lot of cellulose strands in it. And so you want to mince it as small as you possibly can. I remember when I was in high school, we had a lady that lived down the street from us. Older Chinese lady, and her husband was a professor at the local university. And anytime we came by her house, my brother and I would help her put stuff in their yard. She's in her 80s, and she'd give us hot ginger tea. And I still enjoy the scalding qualities of consuming a lot of ginger. And that tea was just clear your brain. So. And set that to the side.
Got a question for you real quick, Chef. Is Tikka Masala actually a true Indian dish?
No, it's not. It is a, I don't want to say bastardized curry, but it comes from either London or Edinburgh. There's a lot of argument over who created it. Certainly it was inspired by Indian cuisine, but it was something that was adjusted to fit the palate of the British diners a little bit better. And yeah, at this point is the most, I believe it is the most widely consumed curry on the planet. So very, very popular. So with cilantro, I typically don't chop it super fine. I like to have a lot of cilantro mouthfeel. I know Meg, you don't like it, sorry. She's over here sticking out her tongue. So to do that, I just kind of bunch it together in a nice tight wad, and then just kind of use the pressure of it unfolding as you cut into it. Kind of helps keep it under control. Just a nice rough chop on that cilantro. That way you get a lot of the visual appeal of it in the dish. Now most cultures in the United States and in Mexico, we refer to this as cilantro. But everywhere else on the planet, this is called coriander. And fresh coriander, yeah. So if you're in the market somewhere else in the world and you're looking for cilantro, that's what you need to ask for. That chicken's starting to sizzle a little bit. I think we're getting where we want to get here, so. Hold my equipment down here. All right, so you can see the chicken starting to firm up. Smells good. All right, so at this point, I'm going to add the tomato sauce right here. This is 8 ounces of tomato sauce. You could also use about 5 to 6 ounces of tomato paste if you don't have sauce. If you use paste, you'll have to add a little extra liquid. And so I like to add stuff in stages and allow it to come back to temperature before I add the next ingredient. This actually allows the dish to continue cooking at a higher temperature and will shorten your cooking time. So one thing that is different between the way dishes are made in restaurants and how dishes are made at home often is that in restaurants people work with hot pans. I actually have my other pans back here on a burner on a flame, staying hot, so that when we start the next dish it goes faster. And I find that the quality of the proteins you're cooking turn out a little bit better. When you start with a hot pan, you get a better sear on it, holds the flavor and moisture of the meat in a little bit better. So the tomatoes coming back to a simmer here, and I'm going to go ahead and add a cup of cream. This is dairy cream. You can, at this point, if you don't want to have dairy in the dish, you can use coconut milk or like coconut yogurt. Certainly perfectly fine to do that. I had somebody ask me about that, if that would change the dish, but it's very common to see that as a substitute. I wouldn't use soy milk or almond milk. I think the flavor gets screwed up a little bit with that, and it tends to break. The tomato, the acidity in the tomato will cause it to curdle. So.
I got a question.
Yep.
Rita asks, is there a spice that you buy that you think most definitely has to come from a particular place / part of the world?
I think saffron is a spice that you should be pretty selective in where you buy it. Most of the markets here in the United States, you can buy what's called Mexican saffron or Spanish saffron. It is not the same thing. It does give color to a dish. Typically, you have to use a lot more of it to get that same robust flavor, sort of depth of flavor that you get from saffron that originates from either Iran or Afghanistan. Just due to the nature of where the majority of high-quality saffron comes from, you have to be pretty selective on who you buy it from. It's one of those things that, like diamonds, that has a lot of sordid history surrounding it, slave labor and abuse. There are a couple companies that work with groups of tribal groups in Afghanistan, specifically women, empowering them to raise crops that they can sell into a high-paying market. One of those sites, a company you can buy online, is called Rumi Spices, and all their spices are fair trade certified. They're paid excellent wages, and it's extremely high-quality product. So, a single thread of high-quality saffron will do the same as 20 threads of low grade. And so,
Rumi, is that like R-O-O-M-I-E?
Yeah, Rumi, R-U-M-I, just like the poet. So, Rumi was an Iranian poet. So. All right. So you see on the edge here, somebody asked me about this yesterday when they made it. See how the oil starting to come out of the cream and the butter? It's because the edge is getting too hot. So just want to keep an eye on it to make sure the dish is moving so that it doesn't separate. At this point, we're going to go ahead and add the rest of the yogurt in. For those of you that had it portioned out, it is pre-portioned for you, and you just need to put the rest of the container in. For the rest of you, it's an additional cup of yogurt. All right. I'm just going to go ahead and let that warm up and then fold it in. It's the simple things I can't figure out. So. My 5-year-old, when I made this the other night, threw a fit when I sat her down at the table with rice. She loves rice. She's like, Dad, you're feeding me something I don't like. It's the worst thing ever. It's like, you haven't even tried it yet. And she ate some and then changed her mind, said it was the best thing she'd had. So this dish without cayenne in it or jalapeno added is pretty mild and very approachable. The color in this is from a smoked paprika, smoked Hungarian paprika, which gives it a really nice flavor. You can certainly use chipotle in this if you want a little heat, or cayenne. My brother-in-law would put like a handful of cayenne there and black pepper, spice it up. He's from Pakistan. He's got a better palate than I have. And so, are you guys all okay with spice if I put jalapenos in it? All right, so I'm going to show you something. We're going to add some jalapeno to this while this is simmering. I don't want it to be super spicy, and make sure when you're working with jalapenos that you have gloves on, okay? because otherwise you'll regret it later on when you like touch your arm or your face. I'm going to go ahead and just peel these out, just the membrane, and just use the fruit. So, and you can just separate the membrane pretty simply by just carving through here. And also pop it out with your thumb and just kind of scrape it out. That's going to give us the flavor of the jalapeno without it being as spicy. And then after cutting the jalapeno, make sure that you change your gloves before you move on to the next level. So. Starting to get hot there.
Rita said that one time.
What'd you say?
Rita said that one time she washed her eye with an ice cream cone because she touched spicy pepper hands to her face.
Oh, and she was giving me a hard time yesterday about injuring my eye after just finishing the OSHA eye safety program. So, yeah, she told me about that. Rita, I'm sorry about your eye. That's really miserable and painful. You can actually damage your eye like permanently with capsation. It's pretty easy to do. So, definitely an occupational hazard with what we do. That was the very first thing that Parker did in her kitchen. He like got jalapeno juice in his eye and then broke my eye washing station. So you can see the chicken starting to firm up here. And
I got a question.
Yeah.
Is it cooking on medium heat right now?
Yeah, this is about medium high if you're going to be cooking this at home. If you're on gas, definitely medium. You don't want it to be so hot that it scalds the cream. All right. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and add the cilantro. I'm going to put about 2/3 of this cilantro into this dish. The rest is going to go into the paneer. All right. Why don't you be willing to grab me some spoons and taste it? Pretty simple dish, like start to finish, what, about 15 minutes? Not bad at all. And this is enough to feed 6 people really, really well as far as quantity. This is 1.5 pounds of chicken. If you're using breast meat, try not to simmer it too long because it will get dry. Started on the next dish. So at this point, for those of you that are working at home, if you've gotten this far, take a clean spoon, try it out, taste it. I can hear them getting spoons there in the background. Thank you. I was not prepared. Thank you, Jade. I was too busy putting together my new grill that I bought before all of this started happening in the world. So you can certainly, while you're cooking, taste your food. Adjust as you go.
Hey Chef, question for you.
Yeah.
While this is preparing.
Oh, that's delicious.
What is your favorite dish to make, and what is your favorite food to have someone else make for you?
I can eat pho until the world ends. I mean, it's a Vietnamese hot broth soup made with bones and star anise, and then just serve it with noodles and jalapenos and thin cut meat. It's pretty delicious. So. My favorite thing to cook, I love working with scallops. I make a good cioppino. I can also eat that, sort of indefinitely. I prefer seafood over most things. So, all right, even sardines. I'll even eat canned seafood. I know that's terrible, but I'm trying to convince my kids that that's a good thing to do. I'm gonna go ahead and just set this out of the way. Move on to the next dish. It is very hot. Like I said, I was keeping my pans warm, so we're ready to go. So this next dish is vegetarian. It's very common all throughout India, and it utilizes a soft farmer's cheese. I run out of fuel on it. think I did. Brandon, do you want to grab me another fuel for this? Sure. Yeah. All right. Always make sure you have enough fuel. All right, well, we're waiting for a new canister. I'm going to go ahead and dice up this next onion. So get this going. Once again, this dish starts with onion, butter, and garlic, just like the other ones. This dish, the flavor profiling is a lot simpler. I'm just going to use garlic and ginger, cilantro. It's all the spice and flavor we're adding to this dish. So it's pretty mild in nature. Hot enough I can start melting some butter in it. Yeah. It's already hot enough I can just start cooking it without the burner. So. This is Brandon's favorite dish. He's not supposed to eat dairy, but he does eat this one. So paneer cheese is something that's actually really easy to make at home. If you ever have, you'll have to use at least whole milk. The procedure, you can do it in a microwave. It's certainly easy to do that way. And but the procedure is pretty simple. You can bring the milk on the stove to 180 degrees, or 88, depending on what elevation you're at. And thanks. Appreciate it. That'll work. All right. Cooking with fire again. All right. Get that back up on the burner. So with the paneer, I was saying, you bring it to 180 degrees. This is what it looks like right here at the end. It looks like compressed feta. It's actually a cheese that's very common throughout the world. In South America and Mexico, they call it queso panela. In Greece, they use a cheese called halloumi. And the thing that's unique about these is that they've been compressed so much that they don't melt. You can grill it, put it in a saute pan and get a nice crust on it. You can slice it, just drop it right into a fryer. In this case, we're going to put it into a curry. So, yeah, at home, if you were making this, you would bring say it was a gallon of milk. A gallon of milk will make about a pound of cheese. Bring it to 180 degrees. You're going to add about a half a cup of white vinegar or fresh squeezed lemon juice. Turn the heat off, put a lid on it, just let it sit for about a half an hour, and then you can pour it through a strainer or a sieve to collect the curds that have separated. And then you just wrap it up in a towel and press it really, really hard for quite a long time to get it to set. And then just wrap it up and put it in the fridge. And it's good to use whenever you want it. It pretty much is just like ricotta cheese, just compressed. So ricotta is also one variation of this. So it doesn't require rennet, so it is a true vegetarian cheese for those people that don't want cow and stomach enzyme in their dairy. But that is pretty simple to make. So I typically don't recommend making it fresh the same day and trying to use it in the dish. So just like with the other one, I'm letting the onions kind of become translucent. And then I'm going to go ahead and add, at this point, the ginger. It'll take a little longer for that to break down. And I'm going to dice up some garlic here. Dice up some garlic. Once again, I think in the recipe I told you 6 cloves.
Hey, Chef.
Yeah.
When I got home, when we got the basket and we picked it up, when I got home, my wife had already eaten all the cheese that we got in the basket.
Well, she'll have to make some more. Anyway.
It's good cheese.
Yeah. So this is for Steph Rasmussen, for that milk you had from last week that went bad. This is exactly what you can make out of that milk once it's gone sour. So this is something I tell a lot of people: when your milk goes sour, do not throw it away. You can make cheese out of it. So it's just starting the process for you. So
good. We have a
lot of.
whole gallon of
Yeah?
really expired milk in our fridge.
If it's really expired, you should probably just get rid of it.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. How are people doing in staying up to this? A few people made this last night and sent me some pictures. It looked really good. So, Alwyn and Gloria made this. Gloria made dinner for her husband. Very brave. He's from India. He's had this before, and has a discerning palate. And she did an excellent job. It looked fantastic. So, all right. So we got our garlic and onions in the pan. This dish is so simple. It really is. All right. So, in your baskets this week, if you had it, I gave you this nasty frozen spinach. People are like, oh, yuck, frozen spinach. I really like frozen spinach for this application, mainly because they freeze it at the peak of ripeness. This is IQF and then chopped and then frozen. Typically, it's already semi-broken down for you. It retains color a little bit better in the pan than fresh. Not to mention, to get that much spinach out of fresh spinach, you need nearly like that much. I mean, several large bags to wilt it down to this quantity. So it just becomes tedious to work with. But it's always good to have just a little bit of frozen spinach in your freezer. Typically, I would thaw it before you put it into the pan. If you put it in frozen, it's going to just lower the temperature and it's going to slow the whole cooking process down. And while it's trying to melt, it's going to burn the spices and garlic and everything on the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and put that into the pan. Like I said, this is a really simple dish, just very few steps. And we're just going to take this spinach and continue sauteing it until most of the moisture that's in that frozen spinach evaporates. All right. It smells good. Ginger is coming out of there. So, all right. Once again, I'm going to put the cilantro in at the very end. The cheese. These blocks of paneer, actually, I'm sorry, these are actually queso panela. It's the same thing. It's very easy to get in the Southwest. If you're any place with a high concentration of Latinos, you should be able to find this at any grocery store. It's really easy to find, typically close to where you find like queso fresco or cotija, but this will typically be there, often in a much larger block. I'm going to say cut it into some cubes. If you need to crumble it, you can. I'm just going to cut that just like that. I'm just going to set it to the side for right now. All right. The spinach is looking pretty good. Like I said, this dish is extremely simple. Very few steps involved. Okay. The next step, I've got a coconut milk here. This is full-fat coconut milk. I don't recommend using light coconut milk for this dish. It just tastes weird. And it is not the same as the coconut milk you buy in the half gallon at the grocery store. This is not Silk brand or something like that. That's coconut milk that's been watered down to use as a breakfast beverage on your cereal. This is full fat, straight from the coconut. It's about 13% milk fat. And this is a 13.5 ounce can. It's a standard can that you buy in the store. This just came from Trader Joe's. So once the spinach is starting to evaporate, and is at full temperature, we're just going to slowly pour this in, allowing it to deglaze the bottom of the pan. Deglazing is a pretty common term. It's just the idea of adding liquid to a pan that's been sauteing with fat in it, and any sort of carbohydrates or starches that will start to brown on the bottom of the pan, developing what they call a fond. It's the base root of like fondue. It's the base of like making a roux. You just basically concentrated flavor. If you let it go too long, it burns, ruin the dish. If you deglaze it, you can pull all that flavor right up into the sauce. All right, like I said, pretty simple. We're going to bring this to a full simmer. I'm going to taste it and salt it, and then we're going to add the cheese and cilantro, and then just set it to the side. It's done. It's really easy to cook. So, pretty much, this is just a spiced spinach with cheese and coconut milk. You can certainly make this kind of cheese with goat's milk. You could certainly substitute, I guess you could substitute feta if you'd like. If you want something that's a little stronger tasting, this is pretty mild tasting cheese, much like fresh mozzarella. It's got a lot of the same sort of characteristics as mozzarella. The difference is mozzarella is made with rennet, so when you reheat it again, it starts to stretch, has like elasticity. This doesn't have that. Kind of sort of the dense, like cheese quality that you get from fresh cheeses. So, all right, going to add this cheese to it. This is one of my favorite dishes. Super easy, really consistent. Everywhere you go in the world, it's going to taste pretty good. Trader Joe's sells it in a little pouch, ready to eat. It's pretty good, and less than 10 minutes to make this dish. All right, we're just going to fold it in carefully. You don't want the cheese to get like totally trashed. And I'm going to go ahead and taste it with a clean spoon. And just a little bit of salt to it. And when I say a little bit, I mean like a pretty good pinch. Always add salt slowly. I do like it, but you can't take it back once you put it in the dish. So, can they see that all right in here? Mm-hmm. You see the colors are still really nice and bright. You can see the translucent onion, got the coconut milk, nice chunks of cheese. You can certainly cook. People will cook this down until it's like brown. I really like to eat it really quickly after making it. So a lot of really fantastic bright flavors from the coriander and from the spinach, and the cheese retains a lot of its texture. So there we have it. That's it for today. So when you're done with this, one of the ways I like to serve this dish, I'm going to turn the burner off. Oh yeah, we should talk about that. Isaiah just reminded me of one element. Okay, everybody loves this. I'm just going to put this in the oven to warm it, but for our group. But what you do with this is called naan. It's a traditional flatbread. There's also what they call roti, which is a little bit thinner. It's more like a crepe. You see pretty ubiquitously throughout Southeast Asia, the Mediterranean. Very common throughout most of the world. So it's just very simple. Butter and yeast and flour. Some recipes call for yogurt in the dough. At home, you would just warm this up like a tortilla. There's two ways you can do it. You can just, if you don't want a lot of extra fat, you can just put it in a saute pan, a dry saute pan, until it starts to brown a little bit. I don't have another saute. I guess you just grab another saute pan. This one's not as pretty as the other ones anyway. I'm gonna get this hot real fast. Remove this. So the way I like to do this, because I like butter, I'm going to go ahead and put butter in this pan. If you have a little bit of spice left, or if you have some cut herbs, it's nice to put on here. Also a great way to use up some garlic. All right, let that butter just kind of melt down and get hot. Grab some garlic salt. All right, so it's got a little bit of garlic salt here. When we're done, I'm going to use this on it just to season it with a little bit of regular, just kosher salt. But my kids love this. It's absolutely fantastic. I will choose this any day over a regular loaf of bread. So once your butter starts getting hotter, let's see here. Make sure the burner's on. That would help. All right, any other questions? Well, fewer questions than last week. That's good. It means it makes sense. It probably helps that I send out a recipe and directions to people beforehand. So,
I guess a question I can ask you: do you always make your own meals, or is there just like a time where you just go for like the box mac and cheese, or like frozen pizza?
I love mac and cheese, man. Frozen pizzas, mac and cheese, ramen. I made ramen noodles for lunch. So, I mean, of all the cheap junk food, that's the one that I would say consistently every chef I know has in their cupboard. So. It hasn't changed much in the last 55 years, so it's all right. We have some heat on there. All right, get these. It's a nice sized pan. You can cover them from there. Yeah, this is pretty tasty. Traditionally, this would get cooked inside what they call a tandoor, which is a big clay oven, build a really hot fire on the inside, and they take the dough and they stick it inside the oven onto the sidewall. And they have these long hooks that they use to grab it. These guys that work on these things are putting their arms down into these like basically kiln hot ovens where they put down skewers of meat to roast. Someday here at the camp, I'm going to convince them to let me build one. So, sort of like the Pakistani and Indian version of the Orno. So, it's pretty common in this area. So, it's a little different working on these little catering burgers. So.
So another question, Chef, that you'd have for like college students.
Yeah.
What's like the easiest college recipe that a college student can make that they can make whether or not they're kitchen challenged?
Ramen noodles. I don't know. I think there's a lot of good food that's semi-made or pre-prepared out there. You just have to like look for it. Pretty easy to eat. What you run into is a lot of sodium content, which I guess some people have sensitivity to. But
Like, are you saying the ramen just straight out of the box at the
Straight like-
grocery store, just put it in a...
right. So, but what I'll do with it is I'll cook it. I'll strain the broth off, and then you can either fry an egg and put it with it, avocado, fresh radish. You take like fresh carrot and like add it to that dish and add some vegetable quality to it. Pour the broth back over it, and eat it. Just gonna fancy it up a bit, but that whole dish, egg, vegetables, ramen is gonna cost you less than $1, so it's pretty affordable. When I was going through school, the only cooking equipment I had in my dorm room was like a rice cooker with a steam insert. I ate every meal of the day out of that. So learned really quick to like make risotto, and also an easy thing to make. We eat a lot of pasta. Pasta's cheap and affordable, pretty single ingredient. Most pastas are just olive oil and semolina flour, so you don't have to worry about a lot of additives. I would just encourage people, if you're buying things pre-made, read the ingredients. Take the time to turn the bottle over or box over and read it. If you can't understand what it says, unless it's in Italian, or if there's more than 5 to 7 ingredients, don't eat it. You really shouldn't be eating stuff that you can't pronounce. So, there's a lot of stuff in the market and typically, like in the store, if it says natural on it, turn it over and read it. That's actually a branded like marketing term, and so everybody tries to sell it that way. But yeah, a lot of pasta, ramen noodles, rice dishes are pretty easy and affordable. It's also worth it to invest in some easy to use cheap cuts of meat. Skirt steak is pretty easy to work with. You use it for carne asada. It holds pretty well in the fridge. If you're buying chicken, I typically lean away from breast meat because it spoils really fast. It also tends to get dried out when you're cooking it. And so if you're not a skilled cook, it just never turns out right. And so eat those thighs. Plus the thigh meat's a lot cheaper. You get thigh meat for 99 cents a pound. Even the stuff that is better quality. And see, we got a little bit of brown kind of building on this naan. Butter's on there. And I'm gonna go ahead and just pull it out, cut it.
And Madeline Linksweiler asked the question.
Yeah.
Did
she give that rib loin back to Josh Baker?
She said full fat coconut milk. She said she could just eat it with a spoon.
Right. Good for her. You know, just drink it. Put it on your cereal. If you're dairy free, just buy the real stuff. It gets expensive to do that, but all right. Put the rest of this off here. You guys can have some if you want. You had that before?
Nope.
It's so good.
Hot.
It's hot too. Yes. Patton's had that before. I could see him when he
Oh,
walked in here.
really?
He's like, he got here just in time, right? Molly, would you be willing to get me some platters again so I can serve food to you guys? All right. Does anybody have any other questions before we sign off and eat dinner? Any requests for next week? I had somebody ask about making paella, which is an excellent dish that's pretty much you can make it with any number of ingredients, vegetarian, typically and traditionally with seafood and like a spicy sausage and chicken. Seafood's a little harder to get in some parts of the world right now. There we go.
Maybe we could just make that fancy top ramen that you were talking about.
We could.
Yeah,
You guys want to do it?
vegetables.
You guys want to do a traditional ramen with like real noodles, and we'll teach you how to make a stock.
Or
Yeah.
do some pho.
We can make pho. You guys want to do Vietnamese food? If I can get the stuff for it. Right now, that can be a little challenging. So make sure you guys save a piece for my kids. They're sitting out there waiting for it. They love this. Of course, they get it more often, so they can.
What did you put on and on?
Just a little bit of paprika, garlic, and salt. So often people put fresh garlic. Sometimes they put fresh cilantro with it. I didn't because this person here in the crowd doesn't like cilantro. I'm sure you can try it.
Somebody said something with shrimp.
Yeah, we can do shrimp. Yeah. Isaiah still has a huge bag of shrimp sitting in his freezer. Yeah. What'd you say? Salmon's really expensive. So someone just asked about doing a salmon dish. We could certainly look at that. We could have it maybe as an add-on item next week. And so we could certainly look at it. But salmon, to buy good salmon, and I would typically avoid buying net pin raised salmon. There's a few exceptions. Net pin raised that comes out of British Columbia is pretty good, and out of the Faroe Islands. From South America or from any of the other places you might find it, I probably would eat it. So, so look for sockeye salmon or coho. The ideal, like the best salmon you can get is Chinook, or what they call king salmon. But I think the only place you can buy it in Santa Fe is at Whole Foods, and it's $29 a pound. So just really inaccessible for most people. Right. Okay, I'm going to turn that burner off. Let's check our rice. Plate up some food. So many parts of India, when they finish their basmati rice, I'm going to go ahead and add a little extra butter to this, because I like butter. And we're going to go ahead and just kind of fold it through. It should be nice and loose, not clumpy. If you do 2-to-1 ratio, it's going to be sticky rice. There are people that love sticky rice. You should use jasmine or calrose, short grain for that. But typically, in an Indian family, they would put a little bit of rose water in here, along with, if you're being real fancy, maybe some cardamom seed and a little bit of butter.
We should do sushi sometime.
You could do sushi. I'm not real good at it, but it'd be fun. I'm gonna put some more butter.
Seems like butter is the secret recipe.
Yeah.
Chef.
I love butter, man. It's the reason I look the way I do. I eat a lot of butter.
We made those potatoes last week, and we put all the butter and stuff in there, and we're like, these are the best potatoes we've ever had, because it was like the most butter we've
Right.
ever put in the chicken.
Right. That's why mashed potatoes are like 70% butter. So, yeah, you can see that the rice typically is going to be pretty loose. If you have too much rice, don't throw it away. It makes great rice pudding the next day. You can just put this back on the stove with a little bit of cream in it, with coconut milk, a little bit of sugar, and if you wanted to then bake it, you could fold egg yolk into it. Bake it off, put a little coconut flake on top of it. In our house, we just simmer it down with milk or cream, and then you can just add a little honey or sugar to it at the end. Cinnamon if you want that. My kids don't like it, but yeah. So never throw rice away. It's good for everything. You can also make fried rice the next day, right? So, all right. So let's go ahead and platter some of this stuff up. These guys are sitting here looking hungry, so we've been out in the sun with Khalid all day, right?
Right.
Or you haven't. You were with Ellen, so. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just put the rice out on a platter. I'm going to do 2 platters. I'll do one with the Tikka Masala and one with the vegetarian. That way, we do have a vegetarian in our midst, so we'll make sure she's taken care of.
Thank you.
These pans are so heavy. All right. So if you have some fresh lemon at home, you could squeeze lemon over this, put a few more fresh herbs, chop some fresh jalapenos over it if you want.
Is that your helping?
Yeah, right? Put some of that bread on here. There's one. And then get that tikka masala, which is smelling really, really good behind me.